he was a remarkable guy, and they like even at his end of his life, like he had tons of children. I think he had 10 children, women out of wedlock, but he wore like either a chain or a wristband that had the that symbolized the seven conquered kings that he was crucially involved in destroying in the overthrow of Central America, creating a new Spain, really independently of the crown. Like they didn't have any day-to-day stuff about what he was doing or oversight. He just told them stuff and then sent them incredible, so much gold that it inflated the gold currency in Spain.
Introduce yourself and just tell me a bit
Sure.
about yourself.
My name is William Ramsey. I'm an author. I was an attorney. I'm still a member of the bar of the state of California. I've written 5 books, made 5 documentaries, and they're all nonfiction and kind of historical based. So I also kind of have some side projects of books that I liked. So I have history books I have a degree in history books read by William Ramsey. And one of them is The Conquest of New Spain by Bernal Díaz Castillo. So it was a book of interest to me, and I've done other readings too of historical subjects as well. But I'm definitely interested in this. I think I haven't read the whole book into kind of audio, but I brushed myself up and went back. I really only covered the real battles all the way to the end of the conquest of Tenochtitlan, which is the main city of the Mexica Empire. They call them the Aztecs, but there's a lot more history there, going all the way back to the founding of so-called discovery of the New World, which obviously already existed, but from the time the Europeans or Spaniards kind of made their way west after Columbus. 1492 was Columbus, right?
Yeah. Well, when I read this book, I came across a reading on YouTube where you were doing the reading about it, and I was interested because not many people, at least not many people that I know of this book. Like I live in Spain, and I teach Spanish students English, and I think I've only come across like 2 students, and I'm talking about out of like 1,000 students who I've taught. I think it's like 2 or 3 at the most who know about this book. So it's kind of interesting to me that that's the case. So
I would say probably because the impact is really in the New World, right? Maybe not as much as Spain, although the reverberations of the conquest are immense to the European continent, actually. But it may not be the Spanish. Don't emphasize it enough. It's a great book. It's really one of my favorite books. It's one of the top 10 books you'll ever read, I think. It's extraordinary. It's an extraordinary, like people talk about the conquest of World War II or Alexander or some of these other known kind of military events. But this is really an extraordinary time of 2 great people coming together from totally different backgrounds. I mean, Cortez himself is really on par in my mind with Alexander the Great. He's really one of the most pivotal figures that ever lived. He's really something else.
do you think he's misunderstood?
Misunderstood. I think can read, just like any historical figure, people can recontextualize them. Times change. It's easier to look back now in 2023 to something that happened in the 16th century and re-identify him. Obviously, the context of him was his rapacious greed, I think, is a fair assessment of part of his ideas of why he wanted to do the conquest. I think so. As far as misunderstood, it's just like people can look at Columbus. What's Columbus? What's the real context of Columbus? What was his effects at that time? What was he thinking? So you had this clash of cultures taking place too. So both parties are foreign to each other. And the Christian element, I think, is an important factor. I actually think, looking at Cortez, he really was a Christian. He didn't quite act like one in a lot of ways, but I do believe he was a person of faith, and you can see through Bernal Díaz, who was with him in all these battles, 109 different battles, that the component of the conquest wasn't just military. It was cultural, intellectual, and kind of a new Weltanschauung that they were putting on to the people of Central America.
The first thing they used to do when they went into each town or village was set up an altar. It was the first thing.
and do mass. They were, I mean, if you read through Bernal Diaz's account, they had mass every morning. They were talking about the Almighty. Even Bernal Diaz is contextualizing it as miracles. The Lady of Guadalupe, which is an important part of current Mexican history, they're talking about her miracles. So they're very Catholic. And even today, so a lot of those churches are built on old Aztec ruins or pyramids, right? So I think still to this day, that was part of the part of the conquest was the religious conquest as well. And I think it was part of their outlook. They didn't like the human sacrifice, the eating of human flesh, the homosexuality they were complaining about. A lot of that stuff was their view, and so um, yeah, I think that was part of that, and that goes through even I mean, you can see parallels between the conquest of New Spain and the creation of New England, really, with those kind of religious figures. They very much the Puritans were very much motivated in the New World by their religious outlook as well, and did there was a lot of conflict as well in that. So I think there are definitely parallels between the Spanish conquest and the English conquest. Yeah.
You mentioned about some of the beliefs earlier on. Could you explain some of the cultural and religious beliefs of the Aztec people in the time of Cortez when he went over there?
Sure. I mean, they had a godhood, right? So they had a sun god. They had different gods like this whole panoply. I think they had one that's like very complex Nahuatl name, Huitlapochtli. But so they had festivals, events. When he was there, really the Mexican Empire was or the Aztec Empire was at its apex, but they still had this kind of godhood where they'd sacrifice, they had household gods, things like that. So I would put them in kind of the pagan environment at that time, but very sophisticated. The the main city of the Aztecs was bigger than London at the time, more sophisticated. They were clean people, had tons of very like the intelligentsia were writing all of these codexes, which were burned to a crisp by the Catholics, which is a disgrace, really, because they probably had information that were unbelievable stuff that they knew. But so they were very sophisticated. Actually, the Catholics took these codexes and burnt them in huge mounds. So it was part of the kind of annihilation of that culture. But it was a sophisticated culture, godhood, believed in human sacrifice. Their military things, they actually didn't want to kill people on the battlefield. They wanted to capture them and then commit them to human sacrifice and then eat them. That was kind of the culture at that time. So that's kind of what the conquistadors were presented with, was that. But they were very sophisticated. I think you can reading Bernal Diaz's view of Montezuma and the Tenochtitlan, the main city of the Aztecs. He was saying these people were very sophisticated. They had strange things, like they ate babies, and there were things that from a European were abominations. And he repeats the word abomination throughout his narrative. But the sophistication, he says, was incredible. Zoos, keeping of animals, uh, major events, festivals, things like that were happening all the time. So that culture is remembered in this book, but I don't think that a lot of that got continued after the conquest.
What were the primary tactics and strategies used by the Spanish during their conquest of the Aztecs? How effective were they?
Well, I think in time they were very effective. They learned the tactics. I mean, it is incredible because the conquest happened so fast, really in kind of human terms, after the discovery or whatever, whenever Columbus made it to the New World. And the tactics they learned actually were things from the old world. They had, right then at that time, a lot of the people who were surrounded Cortez and Diaz were people who had been through the experience in Spain of the Reconquista against the Moors. So they were sophisticated in military terms. They had military armaments, stuff like that. But hold on just a second. Sorry about that. I'm just
Sure,
looking at
sure.
something. So they were sophisticated, and that's kind of an important component, I think, that isn't in the Bernal Díaz narrative, but it's that they came from this time of conflict and violence in the old country. So these were violent people. They were people coming out of the 15th century, 16th century. So those were things they learned, and it is remarkable. So Cortez kind of earned his stripes in the conquest of Cuba, present day Cuba. So he was with this guy Alvarez, conquered that. So he was experienced with that. So they had the advantage of sophisticated ships, cannons, horses. They didn't even have horses in the New World. No wheel. They didn't have the invention of the wheel. So all these things, like there was disparity between the technology of the Spanish, but I think Cortez was always interested in gold. He spent 6 years mining for gold in Cuba, and that's why that was part of the conquest was just to get gold, because it was such a currency back in Spain. And so I think that's when they went, and you can just trace Diaz traces Cortez, who's fighting with the Spanish a lot. There were a lot of betrayals and people trying to arrest him. But going to present day Yucatan, so he went to Cozumel, which is an island off the coast of present day Cancun, which obviously didn't exist back at that time, and kind of bouncing his way up, getting information and learning and skirmishing with these people. So he was learning their tactics. So he was learning what worked, the cannons blasting. They were terrified of the horses. They had never seen the horses before. So those were tactics that he used, and he was getting information at the same time and learning where, like, he could find the gold. Like, that was really it. And he realized that the Aztec Empire, this is a first real person. There were a couple people, there was a shipwreck in the Yucatan that involved, one was a Catholic priest. And that's how he was clever enough to understand that this Catholic priest who spoke the Mayan language would be important because he spoke Spanish. So it was between this guy who spoke Mayan, and then they discovered a woman they called Malinche, or Dona Marina, who became kind of his lover, is my understanding. She spoke Nahuatl and Mayan. So that was the way the communication and intelligence kind of gathering took place. But I think the tactics of the Spanish, they weren't as numerous. And these battles that they were having with people involved thousands of indigenous warriors. But the Spaniards had the advantage of steel and guns and crossbows. So I think that they kind of had a power dynamic. So they would have like ferocious battles for hours and learning for stuff. But the natives really had kind of swords that had obsidian, so they were very sharp. Actually, I think Diaz said they were sharper than the actual blades of the Spaniards. But like I said, they weren't trying to kill people. They were trying to knock them out and take them back for that. But I think that they just had ferocious battles, skirmish. Some battles were worse than others. I don't know what's going on with that stupid thing. Hold on.
Sure, sure.
I have the oven on, so I think I'll never ever have a fire problem in my place. So anyway, I would say that there was a disparity in technology and experience, and they were trying to figure out the Spaniards too. So they were trying to get intelligence. They actually thought they were something they called tulis, which were like demigods, or the receipt of an old prophecy. They had old sophisticated prophecies and priest classes and stuff like that. So they thought it was the return of Quetzalcoatl, and who are these people and what are they? They thought when they were on a horse that they were kind of a minotaur, like some kind of. They didn't understand they were riding the horse. When they captured one of the horses, the natives or the indigenous took it and cut it apart and sent it out so everybody could see it. They were just mystified by it. So I think that the Spaniards had a real advantage in technology, and they used it to their advantage.
What was the progression of their relationship between the indigenous people and the Spanish when they went there? At first, there was a sense of awe that these people, these gods, had arrived. When did it start to change, or did it even start to change?
It's a good question. It seemed like they realized at a certain time, once they were kind of talking with some of the other natives and had native allies, they kind of realized that they were just a different type of human being. But I think initially they were just in awe and mystified. I think that's kind of the indigenous view but they were curious about
Mm.
their rituals and religion too. They understood they were talking about the cross, so they were kind of like getting to know each other as well. And I think that you saw how clever Montezuma was. He was getting intelligence as well. He was having emissaries and tried to do a sneak attack to uh, kill off Cortez and his men in Cholula initially. That was the initial thing. And
Mm.
so
There was always, what I found fascinating in the book as well. There was always this very there was a respect between Cortez and Montezuma, even right till the very end.
it seemed like it. And he, I mean, the retelling of Montezuma was like as a sophisticated king. Like he's had this regal bearing. He didn't like the Spanish to act vulgar. He had a retinue of 2,000 troops on call, and had all the priest classes trying to understand, gathering information. So I think that they kind of did. There was like this kind of chess game between them both. I think Montezuma thought knew he was a threat, and Cortez knew he was a threat too. He was definitely on a drive. He wanted to go to Mexico and see where this thing was, and stayed in Tenochtitlan with his troops, and then had to go back to Veracruz to handle stuff with the Spaniards and get more information. But he was always kind of on this kind of quest for conquest. Is really incredible. And I think that that's kind of was their sensibility from the old world, is that they really were romantic kind of knights on quest ideas. And that's what they said when they were going over on the ships, is they would read these old writers who had these kind of ideas. So I think that was the sensibility of the Spanish. But yeah, I think that they had a mutual respect to a certain extent, to the end. I mean, it's weird how that he got captured and didn't quite. They captured Montezuma or Moctezuma, whatever the new pronunciation is. It is curious that happened, and he was either killed by. There's kind of murky, but there's actually murkier things in Cortez's life, like his old wife or his relationship woman he knew. I think it was his wife from Spain, came to visit him in the New World. She died mysteriously under mysterious circumstances when he was very wealthy. So he was a bit of a rogue. So they might have offed Montezuma and just didn't want to let history, know that they did it. But
yeah, in this age of TikTok and comfort, it's almost like it bewilders a person to think that the sheer goal out of these few Spanish conquistadors to go over there and take over the whole country of Mexico, it's really is it's almost fictional, but it actually did
it's
happen.
almost fictional. It really is. They were remarkable people. The resilience and the aggressiveness and their Christian faith. They never backed down. Like Cortez really was one of the most incredible leaders of human beings, I think, recorded history. I don't know if he's really emphasized enough in kind of the U.S. as a military leader, but his resourcefulness and intelligence and cleverness to survive, and people were betraying him, and how he handled the betrayal, and how he handled the king and Charles, and how he manipulated people, and how he made his money is extraordinary. It really is extraordinary, with not that many resources and not that many men. And really what his skill was is he used the hatred of the client states around Mexico for Mexico to his own advantage. And that's really how he won. Like you mentioned in kind of some of the emails you sent me about the last colonies, his ability to fight them, then turn them to his own use is out extraordinary. So that was one of the key kind of moments where something was turned, where he could actually rely upon the natives to do things for him, carry his baggage and fight. And that they were a crucial component in the overthrow of the Aztec Empire. So
what do you think was the most interesting conflict in the whole book, in the whole series?
I think it was just going against this huge, sophisticated city with tons of warriors and thousands of men, and eventually, getting kicked out. They called it, what was it, the night? I forgot what they called it when they had to leave. So a lot of the Spaniards get captured. They get sacrificed. It's the La Noche Triste, or the sad night. So they get killed by them, but he still has the resilience. And it's interesting because Diaz writes that Court says, I got the guy I wanted, which was his shipbuilder. So they went back and licked their wounds back with the Cholulans, got more reinforcements, and then slowly and systematically destroyed the center of power in Mexico, which was this sophisticated city that had causeways, aqueducts, that looked like something from another, like today, it would be seen as something from another planet. It's all gone now. It's all part of Mexico City. But I think that final battle just showed his, like I said, resilience, his mastery. He was a remarkable guy, and they like, even at his end of his life, like, he had tons of children. I think he had 10 children, women out of wedlock, but he wore like either a chain or a wristband that had the that symbolized the 7 conquered kings that he was crucially involved in destroying in the overthrow of, Central America, creating a new Spain, really independently of the crown. Like, they didn't have any day-to-day stuff about what he was doing or oversight. He just told them stuff and then sent them incredible, so much gold that it inflated the gold currency in Spain for that time. Like,
in later life, the crown refused to give him a pension or something. They refused to recognize him for what he had done, or so there was something like that. Did you hear that?
I don't recollect that, no, but I'm not surprised. Like, he was still adventuring even after the conquest of New Spain. He was involved in some kind of attempt to, like, overthrow Algiers or something like that with his kids. Like, he just had it in his blood. That's just who he was. He really is a remarkable person. But yeah, I think that to answer your question, the eventual kind of battle to overthrow, where they had to go and conquer city after city and then take out the aqueducts and just systematically grind them down over time, is really one of the great battle sequences, as retold by Diaz, in my opinion, in world history. It's like the conquest of Jerusalem by Titus in 70 AD or something like that. Like, that's recalled by Josephus, which I also have in my history books. Like, those are points of history that are incredible turning points. Like, the reverberation of the destruction of the indigenous people in Central America reverberated all around the world into, the U.S. as well, all of its neighbors, stuff like that, to this day.
Yeah, in terms of Christianity alone. Well, speaking so in terms of that, the reverberations of it, the overall reverberation of it in terms of, like, Christianity, do you think he was justified, Cortez? No, I'm not. Of course, I'm not. This isn't a moral judgment. I'm just curious. Do you think he was justified in doing what he did when he went over?
I mean, I think as a Christian, if you're a believer, and this, I think, translates to a lot of the stuff in the States, actually, the kind of modern American view where you Christianize and seek wealth at the same time, which the U.S. has done fairly successfully in the past. At least it's a cover, right? So he wasn't the first or probably the last guy to conquer in the name of God. Like, a lot of the Crusades were done like that. Like, we're doing this for Christianity, while they looted people on the way and did all kinds of nasty stuff. Was he justified? I think from a Christian perspective, if he's a believer, then he's bringing the great, commandment or whatever, to go out and proselytize. And the real truth of what happened there was that at that same time, people, when they were conquering, the Franciscans came in, the Jesuits. So there was a very concerted effort to Christianize the population from Spain. So, and those are some of the more interesting accounts. I can't remember their name offhand, but there were a couple priests who wrote about it. One was very critical. Like, he said, what we did was just like a Holocaust or something like that. I can't remember his name offhand, but there are accounts of around that time of priests talking about what was happening in the New World and what Cortez did. So I think that was just part of their culture. Was it justified? I mean, no. I think that, like, to destroy an entire civilization so you can have greed and conquest and was but it wouldn't be outside the realm of human experience. People have been conquering and subjugating people since the beginning of time. So
as you said, they were the Aztec people. They were very how can I say, technologically advanced. They had their aqueducts and whatnot, but as a culture, human sacrifices, and I know in the book there was like children dressed up, they had like children as prostituting children, stuff like that. There was like heinous things going on. So in that sense, I almost get a sense that Cortez gets over there, and he witnesses the sheer horror of this, and that it's almost like a reaction on his part. Do you see that in that?
Yes, I think so. I think that's fair. I think
Yeah,
that was shared by all of his compatriots as well. I think
yeah.
they were all, telling them to stop doing that. He told Montezuma to stop eating children, so Montezuma stopped. He didn't know any other way, so I think
Mm.
that was kind of his part of his view, was to Christianize everything. I think it was a crucial aspect. I don't think he was making it up. I think maybe he saw that as something cultural that he was going to bring as well, but I think that he was a believer. Like, they say that he was still attending mass and carrying himself off as a Christian, Spanish Christian, member of the. I think Charles eventually became the Holy Roman Emperor, so he was still a subject of Charles all the way to the end. And Charles should have thanked. I mean, for the financial benefits were off the charts. What he was able to achieve, like the amount of gold was just extraordinary that was sent back to the old world.
Mm. And Bernal Diaz himself, what do you think about his person? Of course, it was him who wrote the book, and he lived to be a very old age. And when he was writing the book in old age, how much of his perspective do you think changed? Because as we get older, of course, our memories and our perceptions of things change or alter, in a sense. How much do you think that altered from Diaz himself? How accurate do you think it was?
It's a good question. It's hard to say. It's like a question that goes to historiography itself. How honest are these people retelling Greek histories, Thucydides and these other people? Like, you have to just, everybody's biased. Like, people try to get bias out of somebody. He's going to be biased of his own time. A man who's from Spain, who's a lesser aristocrat, just like all these other guys are. Uh, so it is really one of the best accounts of this whole event as somebody who participated in it. Nobody else really, to my knowledge, wrote about this stuff. Not even Cortez. Cortez sent out letters back to the old country, but he never took the time to write the history, is my understanding. So I think that it has a ring of truth to it. I think that he wasn't really trying to salvage his own Spanish. I mean, he writes about betrayal and backstabbing, and but he seems to have an admirable view of Cortez's capacity as a military leader, or just a leader in general. But I think that he was kind of like a band of brothers in his sense. Like, Cortez was the boss, and he like said things about Cortez which were not positive. Cortez was always manipulating these guys for money. He always wanted his fifth share. So you can see Cortez's greed, I think, is in this. So I think that he shows kind of even the darker sides of Cortez as well. So it's a hard thing to say. I wouldn't discount this. This is somebody who was there fighting the battles. So you can, in all history, it inevitably will be seen in a different context depending on time, space, gender, everything, age. So
It's, yeah.
it remains extraordinary. I think it stands the test of time.
What is the one thing about the book that that you found that you didn't like about it? For example, what's the one thing that you didn't like about it?
It's a good question. I mean, I think, like, greater context. I mean, context in time and what happened. I think, but he takes his time. It's definitely a tome. I mean, I think there's 700 total pages, so I think it's fairly thorough. Even stuff that, like, I've read into my record on my podcast, just like I said, all the way up to the end of the Mexican Empire. But he includes a lot of other conquest things going down to Guatemala and things like that. But and a detailed kind of analysis of Cortez and his personality and the way he ate and dressed and things like that. But I would have liked maybe a more thorough thing about the culture. Like, I think they just had a disregard for, like, the indigenous worldview, culture, art. So, but I think that he put a lot in there. So maybe more of that would be something that, for history's sake, would have been
What
nice to memorialize.
What do you think Bernal would think of our modern day society?
He'd
Modern
probably be shocked. I'd be shocked at what happened after the conquest, what
in what
led up to everything. Because it really solidified. I mean, I think the conquest solidified the ethnic Spanish, as the governors of New Spain, and the indigenous really kind of went into kind of a race class based order all the way up to this day. I mean, I think that the real people who run Mexico are the native people from Spain that had all the money, but it led directly up to the first Mexican Revolution in 19th century. Was this kind of class system and the solidification of land into these old family